Hi, my name is Tom Johnson, and this is a recording of an AI book club held August 17, 2025. We're discussing Kai-Fu Lee's book titled AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. It was originally published in 2018, but is surprisingly relevant and seems to align a lot with today's events, especially around China, which is why I selected this book. If you're new to the AI Book Club, or if you're thinking about joining, you can find more details at i'dratherberwriting.com/AI-book-club. And it has the upcoming schedule. We typically read about a book a month, and the books are generally about AI, trying to align with whatever topics are current and interesting. The book club gives us an excuse to just dive into some of these books and then have a good discussion with other people who have read them. The people don't necessarily need to be technical writers. You can be of any project or any role, any company. It just you just need to have an interest in AI. Typically, we do have a lot of technical writers, though, because that's my audience, and so you'll find at least half or two-thirds of the people do have tech com backgrounds or tech backgrounds. So we often bring that lens to try to understand AI in the context of that role and how it affects us. So again, this is a discussion, so topics are all over the place. There's 3 people plus me in this book club discussion, and it goes on for about an hour. So thanks for listening. I'm excited that both of you came to this book club. Last month was kind of a downer because nobody showed up, but then again, it's summer and so many people are traveling. But this book this time, actually, a lot of people really liked. Sorry, I'm trying to hold it up. I'm sure it's backwards, right? It's so why I didn't even hold that up. But well, maybe some others will join, maybe not. But hey, 3 people is enough for a discussion, and I'm hoping to have that here as well. So let's kick things off. Florence and Molly, what did you think of this book? Like, did you have any general reactions? Did you like it, or did you dislike it, or did you think it was dated or still relevant? Feel
You
free
go
to.
first, Molly.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, overall, I liked it. I learned a lot about things that I hadn't considered. Like, I haven't really been thinking about what's going on with China and AI at all. So it was great for that. I got so much out of just hearing how Chinese businesses, like their tactics when they compete with other companies. Like some of the stories he told about like the QQ versus Chihu, uh, the whole face-off thing. It's just like fascinating. Like it's just businesses operate a little bit differently there, and I thought it was really interesting to learn about that. What else? I did have questions about the timing of it, since it did come out. I think it was 2018 was when it came out. So
Yes.
there's like, I don't know enough about AI to know if what I'm thinking is right, but like I don't know if things are playing out exactly like he said they would. So there's that side of it. I thought his idea about the social investment stipend, I think that's what it was called. I thought it was interesting, but I feel like there's probably holes in that idea that could like could make it so it doesn't work out. I don't know. But I liked it. I like that he gave a lot of attention to the labor question, because I feel like a lot of the books we've read have kind of given a little like call out to it and then moved on to something else.
Yeah. Well, those are all great points. I jotted down a few notes just to jump off and discuss some of those points. But before we do that, Florence, what was your high level reaction to the book?
I liked it. I like that it caught me because yeah, like Molly said, I didn't I guess I'm very US centric that I didn't consider what like China's impact and how AI was developing there, and the whole uh I read somewhere, like, I think in your summary, the duopoly, this race for AI. So that was like something new to me that I wanted to learn about. Okay, just full disclosure, I've gotten through the first half, and then I just read your summary for
Yeah.
the second
Okay.
half. But I read the last chapter, so I knew where it was going. Um, so just right before this call, I asked ChatGPT, okay, how do the forecasts of this book stand up in 2025? And it said that that it's pretty, it's held up pretty well. So that was what interested me. And
Hey, yeah, the welcome Raimi. Just wanted to pause and say
Remy,
hi. Thanks for joining. We're just talking about high level reactions to the book, and Molly and Florence were kind of going over different points that jumped out at them. And I thought we should jump off on some of these because they provide excellent starting points, and we'll ask you in a minute what your high level reactions are too. But the first one, just that the sense of an eye-opening about China and their competition, dominance, kind of excellence in this whole field. I think we are very U.S. centric. Typically, people actually, Remy, I don't know are you U.S. or are you outside of the U.S.?
I'm in New York.
Oh, okay, another East Coaster. Okay, well, we've got Boston and New York as well. Yeah, I think we tend to be pretty myopic about just like our worldviews in general, and this was an eye opener for me about China's like extreme competitive dominance in this space, and it's kind of a scary. I don't know if scary is the right word, but it's sobering to think about like what it would look like if China wins the AI race. Maybe some people think they've already won in many respects. But I started gathering different articles. Like I just started seeing all these articles now. And I started listing a few here where, let me see if I share my screen. Yeah. So just like I'm keeping my eyes open, and as I'm reading different news sites, I just keep seeing articles like this. China's biotech is cheaper and faster. This is like today, talking about how they're able to produce so many of these mainstream pharmaceutical drugs cheaper and faster, which is what so many people want and need. I work in an auto-related domain, so I've been following the car industry news for a long time. And basically, the only reason that there's still an American car industry is because we've tariffed China's EVs so much. Otherwise, they would probably just decimate the car industry here. The energy sector is also like dominating. We've got another article on energy. These are all just pretty recent articles talking about how China is kind of like really knocking it out of the park here. AI experts return from China stunned. The U.S. grid is so weak, the race may already be over. Talking about how like energy, which is used to power so many data models and so on, and all the AI infrastructure is just sort of everywhere. This energy availability. So it's eye-opening to read this book that was written in 2018 talking about like, hey, China has a real chance of not just competing but overtaking the U.S. and so on. And it looks like a lot of this seems to be happening. Do you notice like, are you noticing more articles as you read the news about China's like dominance in different fields and AI and so on? Yeah, I mean, the book, like that was probably the main takeaway for me from the book, is to recognize that, yeah, the world is really probably a duopoly. I don't know if I was really hoping some Europeans would join today, because I know we have some people in France who participated in the past, and I wonder what their opinion is. I mean, it's not like France is not in the AI game. They've got Mistral and other things going on, but to see the world as a duopoly between China and the U.S. basically leading the pack in the same way that like corporate dominance can be centered on a handful of big trillion-dollar companies, it's kind of unsettling as well, right? Anyway, Remy, tell us your high-level thoughts on the book. What did you think of it?
Yeah, well, nice to meet you all. This is my first AI book club with you guys, so happy to be here, and thanks for creating the space, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I found it fascinating. I had some of the same reactions in terms of, just not previously having had a deep understanding of where China fit into this puzzle. And I mean, I really liked the way the author framed a lot of it. I thought, it had a nice sort of warm ending I didn't expect. But I agree with a lot of the takeaways about kind of moving to a more humanistic way of, sort of human service jobs and constructing a society around sort of supporting each other. I do think that, I mean, what was most kind of eye-opening for me was understanding how, this has not been like in previous waves, like the previous general purpose technologies, China's really not been in a place to meet the moment in the way that the US has, but they really are now. And I think what I find most striking is just the manufacturing difference. I mean, he talks about how, you could sort of automate parts of that, and maybe the US will eventually go that direction. But right now it's so China dominant that I can totally see the third and fourth waves of AI going that way. And having some kind of bottleneck or really sort of demanding a kind of turning over of US society and how we manufacture here. The other thought I had was just, to this point about, I don't want to say who should win, and he talks about not framing it as a race with a winner, right? I mean, I agree with that framing, although I think I have some pessimism about that, just given the state of the political sphere internationally. But there are really significant political and cultural implications to China versus the US becoming the dominant force in global AI. And I think, I guess one thing I was kind of surprised by, I mean, he tried not to go deep on like moral judgments on the political systems, but I think you have to really consider this critically. Like there's a very significant difference between the political systems and setups. And I think part of the reason that there's so much, at least my understanding, part of the reason there's so much fear and concern about China winning the AI race is because of the implications of that for global democratic institutions and culture, for example. So that was one of the things that kind of stuck with me in the end, is like there's a really big question mark here about what happens if China does kind of overtake in those third and fourth waves.
Wow, you've got great insights here.
Just questions. Mostly just questions. But.
Yeah, that last point about the political impact of China sort of winning and dominating is an interesting thing to think about. It reminded me of this TV show that was pretty popular a few years ago called Man in the High Castle. Not sure if you've seen that, but that's like one of these imagined rehistoric, I don't know what you call it, but they like imagined historical revisions, and it reimagines how history would have played out if the Nazis had won World War II. I mean, you've seen other kind of reimaginings like this too. I think there was one on Apple TV about like if Russia was the first one to put a person on Mars or not Mars, on the moon or something. But how would things play out politically if China was basically dominating in so many aspects? Would we see a decline in democratic institutions? Would people just decide that democracies were weak and that we needed more authoritarian shaping and government subsidizing and forcing of different economies and markets and so on? It is interesting how that would play out.
And it's unknowable, right? But sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I totally lost my thought. But like, first, I think that your point about how it impacts the, the political systems that we have is kind of a good answer to the so what question, because when I'm reading, oh, China's going to become dominant, like, who cares? So why? Like, but it's a good point about it impacting politics and our cultural values.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, anyway, sorry, I blanked on what I was going to say next. So go on.
Well, I mean, I think my fear of China, quote, winning, let's say that they become the dominant automaker because they've just got so much more capable AI driven cars, or not necessarily AI driven, but they've got the perception rendering in there that makes them so much better. If that puts out of business so many of the automakers, then my job, which is documenting APIs for cars, like map based APIs, might go away because like there's no audience for our product, right? It's like all based in China or something. So it would have like a real impact economically in a lot of sectors that I think would affect us. But yeah, the author really doesn't want to characterize it as like a race, as Remy pointed out, where somebody wins, because yeah, and the author turns like, I don't know about the conclusion and his solution to this with the whole like social investment stipend theory or idea, and even UBI and so on as a solution. Like, we can't just be competing economically against each other. We have to sort of move towards this humanitarian, socialist looking society. I just don't really buy that. I don't know. What did you think about that sort of conclusion the author makes, which he comes to after having a real health scare with cancer and so on? Did you find that compelling, or did it seem naive and idealistic?
It's hard to imagine companies all agreeing to kind of transform the way that they create value. And I liked the idea. It sounded great, but it's hard for me, one, to imagine us all agreeing to collaborate and cooperate with each other. And it's also hard for me to imagine, like, I feel like something could go wrong in that setup where maybe the government decides that these values are important and really forces people to prioritize sort of fringe beliefs that the government is pushing forward, and creates sort of a new sort of dystopia. Like, I feel like there could be a way that this could definitely go wrong. I don't have any better ideas, but I liked it, but I've also felt like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't see myself as doing some kind of like care profession where I go and like help the elderly and something. Like, it's not what I sort of do. I can't imagine doing that, but maybe there is some role that we could play. But yeah, I can see your point about how this could easily become its own dystopia, with government telling people what to do and people revolting and, I don't know, forming splinter societies and everything fragmenting. Remy, what did you think more about the author's social investment stipend solution?
I mean, personally, I really like the idea. I think there are, lots of questions and implications about the execution, but I like the idea actually over UBI. As someone who I work in nonprofits. I've always been very kind of social impact minded. So it was a very appealing idea to me, just to think about like incentivizing, supporting each other and community engagement. Whereas I think our current system kind of incentivizes not that, like turning a profit at any expense, unfortunately, often at the expense of other people. So I don't think it's a bad idea, even regardless of the timelines of AI and automation. I think it's actually a good idea to entertain. I do think that, there is a really big question. I mean, to Molly's point about how this could go dystopian, I mean, obviously anything could, right? But the question of who decides what is covered by a social impact stipend has really big implications, right? Like what qualifies, so to speak. and who decides also within organizations and between organizations what kinds of work really need a human in the loop, right? Because there are going to be entrepreneurs always who are saying, well, we could automate that, we could AIify that, right? And so I mean, you could say maybe this is where some kind of regulation comes in. Maybe it's just sort of social regulation or it's government regulation. But I do think at a certain point it becomes hard to control for that. And that's only within a country. That's not even talking between countries, right? Like then you bring in international competition. And if the US theoretically got to some kumbaya harmonious state where we were all like helping each other and getting social impact stipends, and then China is not doing that, what does that mean for the state of the global economy and productivity and competition? So, I mean, I really like the ethos of it. And I think it's a really good, I actually think it's a good thing to push for, even in our current society, like to walk towards something that incentivizes cooperation and social participation. I also think, to your point, Tom, like there are a lot of people out there who probably right now cannot imagine themselves, not doing the kind of work they've chosen. I also see that as a product of like the culture in many, many generations of our culture in some ways. Like we have learned to associate our identity so tightly with the work we do. And if we made some shift to prioritizing the kinds of work he's talking about being covered by the social investment stipend, maybe 2 or 3 generations from now, there's really not a misalignment. Like people do find purpose and productivity in that kind of work and meaningful connection. But I get how the transition would be rough because a lot of people are not there yet. And I'm not there yet. It would be like a big sea change, basically. It would have to happen over time. So it would need to be kind of an intentional policy choice that I think would bear out over time, but it would leave some people behind in the process.
It's cool that you are involved in nonprofits because you definitely bring a good perspective to this discussion, for sure. And I totally understand that like so many of our identities are wrapped up in our current work, and it's hard to see ourselves doing any other path and so on. And it doesn't have to be that way, as you say. It may just take time to reset and so on. But let's jump more into this idea, not so much the social investment, but the reason why Lee even talks about this social investment in UBI. He predicts that 40 to 50% of people might lose their jobs, and because of this, there's going to be massive social unrest. He thinks this is the main threat more than anything else. He's not really aligned with the idea that AI is going to subjugate humans and annihilate us. He thinks that it's going to be the social impact of mass unemployment and disruption and change to the labor force and so on that will create different like almost working caste classes and just a lot of people not sure what to do. We already saw in the last election, there's a lot of people who feel well, a lot of the people who voted more conservatively and in places where like their economy is languishing wanted to bring back manufacturing or do something, right? They felt left behind and so on in this world that was, I don't know, moving forward. And that created a lot of political division and so on. So this idea that massive changes to our workforce would create a lot of social unrest is pretty compelling. Do you agree? I mean, this book was written in 2018, which surprisingly like still feels very relevant, even though so much. I mean, this is before ChatGPT has even come out. It's hard to believe. But do you agree with the idea that in 2030, for example, or 2035, we'll see 40 to 50% unemployment? Or is that a premise that you're still kind of unsure about? Like, I don't know, this AI thing might just be overblown. People are overestimating what it's going to do. I'm kind of split. I'm not entirely persuaded because I mean, I try to use AI as much as possible in my job, but right now I can only feel it like giving me a, I don't know, 30%, 40% lift and so on. It still needs a lot of human steering and direction and so on. So the idea that entire jobs would just be automated seems to me very dreamy and very optimistic, but I don't know. Any thoughts on massive unemployment to come and what to do?
Um, just okay. Like I gave you full disclosure, I skimmed over the second
It's
half of the
okay.
book.
It's okay.
But, I was just thinking about that. Um, like you, Tom, you yourself said that you can't imagine yourself working with the elderly. I, I, I'm in. I'm a technical writer, as you all probably are, and but I also am a caregiver to my mother,
Hmm.
and I have to manage her caregivers. So I see, firsthand people working with the elderly. And my daughter is is in college right now, or she just finished an associate's degree, and she is looking into going to healthcare. I don't like the book talks about the social, whatever he calls the SDI, the social incentivized to do social jobs. I'm thinking that the market itself, like the new generation of workers, are seeing that, are looking at their future and seeing which jobs are not, are AI low risk for AI automation. And I think the new generation will just veer toward those jobs as a market driven thing versus as a government incentivized thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
I
do you
mean,
feel like do you feel like your daughter was thinking about AI when she chose, you said she went into healthcare? Like, was it on her
Yeah,
mind?
no, because of my experience in technology and AI, I I made her aware of that,
Yeah.
and that's just helped push her more towards uh, a caring position, a healthcare position. You know,
uh,
so those are that's my thoughts as
Yeah, that's
hearing what you
interesting.
guys.
I mean, I feel like he
Sorry.
took a really nuanced. I appreciated his discussion about the unemployment thing because I thought he took a nuanced approach, which was you can't necessarily talk about entire jobs being automated, but tasks being automated. And even if you could theoretically, like I think the projection he ends up with is like 38% based on the way we normally consider some things, but then there's an extra 10% if you add in some of the kinds of work that are not considered in the other studies. So it's maybe 40 to 50% of jobs that could be, like, parts of which could be automated. But it's true that all jobs are are partially tasks that might be automatable and partially tasks that can't, which are like the human connection piece. And he also talks about, like, um, the downward pressure on industries. Like, if people do, to Florence's point, if people do flood into industries that seem less AI vulnerable, there'll be a lot of pressure on those industries and the salaries, and like it's gonna there's there will be disruption no matter what, basically. I do think that, I mean, the other nuance that he adds is like there will be social and economic pressures that don't cause it to happen all at once and may even draw it out on a much longer scale. So I feel like it's true because there are a lot of people and industries that will just not adapt on even on the timeline that entrepreneurs want to see disruption happen. And we also haven't answered, and I think it will take a long time to answer some of these social philosophical questions about what we do with that displacement, basically. So I think all of that is going to, lead to some degree of disruption in most fields, and also a lot of like very drawn out negotiation about what actually ends up happening to those jobs. And I think it'll more likely be like the task centered approach where like pieces of jobs get automated. And the question is, are there enough pieces of your job that are automatable theoretically that we could wipe it out altogether. Like JP Morgan Chase laid off 10% of their workforce in favor of automation, and Microsoft laid off 8% of their global operations workforce in favor of automation, right? So those jobs are definitely at risk, at least for big tech companies. I think the question is all of like his upshot at the end is like there are jobs at the top and at the bottom that are safe, but then the messy middle, like the middle class bedrock, is actually most at risk because a lot of those pieces might be automatable. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's true that it's going to be really messy, and it's probably not going to happen all at once, and it's probably going to cause a lot of upheaval.
Remy, can I ask, what is your profession? Are you a tech writer? Are you a product manager or something totally different?
Something totally different.
Okay.
So I work at a nonprofit called Compass Pro Bono in Washington, D.C. We do pro bono consulting and board matching for other nonprofits, for local nonprofits in all kinds of issue areas: homelessness, healthcare, environment, sustainability. I've been there 4 years. I was kind of in a strategy role before. Now I'm director of AI and thought leadership. So a lot of my day-to-day work is I actually consult for nonprofits on responsible AI integration and how to do it in the ways like I led that in my organization over the last 2 years. So I've created kind of a framework. I teach other nonprofits about it. I speak at conferences about it. And then the thought leadership piece is like turning our 25 years of institutional knowledge into education for other organizations. So that's kind of my day-to-day. So I'm fascinated by AI on a personal level, and I play with it all the time, but I also have like thought a lot about it on an organizational level, institutional level. And I have pretty lofty dreams about how it could change our sector and our culture, but I know there's a lot in the way of that. So
cool. Well, we're glad to have you here. Yeah, I mean, just to give you a little more background, I'm a technical writer. I work at a big tech company. I'm in Seattle, and I think a lot of the book club is open to anybody, really, any roles. It's just my sphere of influence online is mostly around tech writers, so that's usually who gets the work. But I'm excited that you're here because you do have a lot of knowledge, and it's apparent that you've thought deeply about this topic. So that's great. This idea that you were talking about and others were talking about hits any role. This idea that we have to figure out what profession will be safe from AI, and those professions are basically what AI is weak at: the social, emotional connection, and so on. Which in tech writing, I don't think it exists. I mean, like maybe you have empathy for the user, but it's nothing compared to what, I don't know, other roles might have. Do you see, you advise different companies on a lot of different AI things. What would you say to technical writers who are trying to evolve their role and try to evolve it in a way that's going to be safe from AI, that's going to land in one of these human sweet spots that AI can't really easily automate?
Well, I would first be really interested in understanding a little more of what technical writing actually looks like day to day, because I don't actually know at all.
I mean, it's like user guides for technology products, APIs, for example, that developers use integrating. I mentioned I do like documentation for APIs in cars. So you get in your car, let's say it's a new car, it's got Google Maps in there. It's like, well, how's it getting all that map data? APIs are pulling it in. Somebody has to figure out how they integrate it, that kind of thing. And I'm sure everybody has similar roles. And
Florence and Molly, you guys are in that space too. Okay, super interesting. Yeah, no, I'm really glad to be in conversation because I mostly talk with nonprofit folks, so it's great to hear some other perspectives. I mean, I sort of think that the philosophical question that he talks about, he invokes a couple of times, which is, in a world where AI can do much of what humans can do, what does it mean to be human? I think it's a really important one to kind of meditate on a very personal and organization specific level. Like, what are the things that we need to thrive and do our work and connect in meaningful ways? for my work, and the work that my colleagues do, I actually feel, and a lot of the work that nonprofits in our sphere do, I feel like it's pretty buffered because there's a lot of human to human connection. There are a lot of ways they can use AI that they're not yet, which is why I go and consult for organizations that are thinking about it. But I kind of see this as an opportunity to redefine our relationship with the work that we do. And, maybe that's easy for me to say because I don't have a job that feels directly very automatable. So there's like a bias there. But what I would be interested in understanding is like when you guys think about your work and also the sphere of work around you and like the kinds of things that constitute the building blocks of the end product, like are there, if you feel like 60+% of your work could theoretically be automated in the next few years, like is there a chunk of your work that still gives you excitement and meaning and value that you feel is in the other category, which is like the connection? I mean, it sounds like, Tom, you were saying maybe not because it's just like empathy for the end user. But like for me, the opportunity is like, well, maybe there are now, there's like a role you play in, even if it's not the social emotional side, maybe it's like managing the AI and the algorithms and the things that kind of power that work, right? Like in the same way that spreadsheets and calculators fundamentally changed how we did math and data analysis. Like we didn't all suddenly become, like useless because of that. We just ended up managing the systems that manage the data, right? Not that there was no displacement, but
I think that's a more reasonable forecast of the TechCom role, becoming a manager of the systems and the data. Here's how I envision my job will work within a year's time. I will set up some kind of jobs overnight to start tackling different doc tasks. I show up in the morning and I review the content that AI has written, and I maybe make changes, maybe not just manually, just as a director saying, hey, add some more detail here. You forgot this part here, and make sure you single source it over there or something. But I feel like I'm going to have a list of stuff to review, and my job won't really involve writing, but more just like steering what agents tackle, what priorities they do. I don't know, more of like a manager of AI, not manager of people, manager of the AI outputs. But also like there's a tremendous need, and this is the nut nobody can really seem to crack, is there's a tremendous need for these AI systems to be smarter and more intelligent. When people type in something, do they get the right answer? For example, in my scenario, let's say you want to build a mapping application. You're a developer, and you have your coding environment, and you just type out in natural English, hey, I want to embed a map here that has 3D zooms over the Eiffel Tower. You don't want to code any of it. Well, what are the chances that the AI agent can successfully perform all of that, right? How do we make sure that these AI agents are capable? They have to get the right information. We have to identify the gaps. We have to make sure that they're successful and so on. And being able to plug that gap and make sure they don't hallucinate or they don't have errors seems like a huge role in the future as well for tech writers.
Yep.
I still don't see
totally
this.
agree.
I still don't see the social emotional part of our job. I mean, I'm still, it could just be me, but Molly, Florence, what do you think of that? Do you think your job will look like what I just described, or will it look totally different?
I agree with what you described, of managing the AI outputs and making, plugging the gaps, being less of like writer, but more like an editor, yeah, so I completely agree with that. And also I was mentioning how I met Tom at the Write the Docs conference in Portland. And I spoke with other people and they also, echoed what you just said about plugging, like preventing the AI from hallucinating, plugging the gaps where, like, plugging the gaps of the AI's knowledge. That's what I see what my job will be in the future.
I agree. I already find myself managing it, like where we have it on our knowledge base, and we also have it in the app now, so that it uses the docs that I wrote to answer every customer's question. And when I find it saying something that's absolutely wrong, then I have to go find whatever article it's using or try to figure out how to tweak our docs just so that it gives the right answer. There's a lot of that I'm doing now that I hadn't been doing before. I feel like that'll become a bigger part of my role. Yeah, so like definitely managing AI will become important. But I have another part of my writing where I feel like I still want to do a lot of the writing, the initial writing myself. And I feel like that's not gonna work well when people expect you to adopt AI more, because I feel like if I want to connect to the topic and understand it, I need to write about it. I need to write about it myself before I get AI involved. Like a lot of times I'll get feedback on drafts, but I feel like my unwillingness to let go of writing out drafts is going to work against me in the future.
I mean, sorry, I almost disagree, Molly, in the sense I do think there'll be pressure, but I also think that like the taste, like where I'm worried about people who are just entering the workforce, because I think the ability to develop expertise and taste happens over time, and that's going to be a real skill set when you become like an editor or modifier of AI outputs. Like you need to have that deep understanding in order to say this is a good or bad output. But if you never get the chance to build that, and I don't know what will happen with new generations entering the workforce, but for people who are currently in the workforce, like whatever your system is for developing taste and like an ability to look at an output and say this is good or bad, like that comes with lots of experience and whatever process it takes you, right? So I mean, I agree there'll be pressure, but I almost think that, in certain ways it's safer to be someone who doesn't use AI at every part in the process but still has the taste to be able to like critically judge the outputs of the AI and then steer them in the right direction, versus someone who hasn't even entered the workforce and had the ability to develop the taste that's needed to assess. Like if you've only ever written essays with ChatGPT, you probably don't know what non-ChatGPT writing sounds like. You probably don't recognize why ChatGPT writing feels a little bit off, because you just haven't seen and created that much writing that's been critiqued in the way that, now I look at, I go on LinkedIn, I see a bunch of ChatGPT captions. I can recognize the patterns because I've used LLMs, but also because I developed taste for good writing. So I would imagine the same thing is going to apply in a lot of professions.
I definitely agree that like without expertise, using the AI tools is going to be very difficult, right? You got to be able to know when it's off and be able to steer it. And if you're just drawing a blank, it doesn't work. I found this to be especially true with code samples. I'm not an engineer, so if I use AI to write a code sample, I can kind of see what's going on, but I don't have the engineering expertise to really thoroughly know if it's good or bad or even works without sinking a lot of time. So I just kind of don't even try that. I just tell engineers to produce the code for whatever we need. But yeah, the expertise is critical. And if the only way you get expertise is by going through some of the writing more manually, that seems valid. I did want to push back a little bit on an assertion I was making earlier that there was no social emotional component to the tech writing role, which might be overstated, because I do think that writing itself, perhaps more of the personal creative writing, does have a tremendous social emotional component. If I write a blog post on my site, for example, if I have just AI write it, there's very little meaning behind it, and I don't learn from it. I really use writing as a way to think through something as well as to respond to what other people are writing. Like it's very much a social interactive space, and it requires me to process ideas as well, right? The emotional impact of ideas. So writing itself is this weird paradox where, like, on the creative side, it's very social, emotional. I don't see it being easily automated. Nobody likes AI slop. But in the workspace with tech docs that are meant to be more Wikipedia-like, factual, not really a persona or voice or creativity there, doesn't seem to require that same degree of social emotional commitment or investment, at least for the work I do. So interesting.
That's a good point.
Let's see. There's one. Okay, let's hit this topic that Dan proposed. Dan, who couldn't be here. I had a couple of people email me and say, "Hey, I really like the book. I just couldn't be here. I mean, due to this time." One of those people is Dan, and he said he wanted to better understand, like current events with China, especially in terms of the NVIDIA deal, where the government gets 15% of all the chip sales to China as a kickback to the government. How does that fit into like the framework that Kai-Fu Lee is talking about? Like we're reading this whole book on China. Certainly that provides some kind of lens by which we can interpret current events with China-based AI policies. And I was scratching my head on this one. And so I plugged some resources into Notebook LM and asked it this question. And I'm kind of curious to see what you all think of this. But basically, Notebook LM said, okay, the idea is that by not selling the most advanced chips to China, the US maintains its dominance in the age of discovery, or in the discovery sort of aspect of AI. But it's sort of conceding that the implementation aspect can be dominated by China or other people. Like the author separates out this age of discovery versus age of implementation. The author's argument is that we've kind of passed the age of discovery. We're now in implementation. Ironically, this is before ChatGPT had come out, or at least in a mainstream way, in 2018. So I'm not sure if like that was short-sighted. But this idea that there's discovery and implementation. And if you want to dominate discovery, you need the most advanced AI chips, and the US is going to hold on to that and try to compete there. But like we'll still sell the chips and let other people implement AI. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how to interpret current strategies the US has, if you can even call them strategies, with China around AI? Is there any kind of like enlightened viewpoint that we get from Kai-Fu Lee on current events, or is it just like unrelated, really? Yeah, I sort of feel the same way. Like I feel as if I should have more insights on this when I don't really, but
I don't know enough about this.
yeah.
I was really surprised by the deal, the 15% deal, because I mean, I guess not surprised. Well, it was unprecedented to have a deal like this, right, with a private company for the government. But I do think it's a really hard question. Like, what do you do about chips? Because there's some benefit to the US economy if we sell to China, and there's some risk if we let China, develop their own chips, and then like there's some competitive risk, so to speak. And even though the Chinese government has been pressuring companies like domestic companies to use Chinese chip makers' chips, they have still all preferred the NVIDIA chips so far. So, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question. I think part of my interpretation of Kai-Fu Lee's argument is that we're rapidly moving away from the age of discovery. And I think part of that might be like, I mean, and it was 2018 also, right? But like, if we didn't sell NVIDIA chips to China at all, it might just be a matter of time until Huawei and Quen chips are just as good and favored, right, in Chinese companies. So, I see the advantage to the US economy from doing that. The 15% cut is really interesting. I guess the lingering question for me is, what is the actual long-term implication of like the cultural political war, so to speak, between the US and China of doing this? Because this maintains some degree of influence. I mean, I think the good thing about it in some sense is that if China owns manufacturing in a very significant way, but the US owns chip making in a very significant way, then China doesn't have the only upper hand in the third and fourth phases of AI implementation. We could say, hey, we're going to not sell you our NVIDIA chips anymore if you don't help us manufacture like the next wave of AI native mobile tech tools or whatever it is, hardware, perception AI hardware. I don't know. That's a drastic oversimplification, obviously, and China could very easily say, "Well, now we studied your chips and we have the tech, so we don't need it." But that's my like high level thought about it. Like I do think it's good to have some leverage. I don't know if this goes, if this is enough to actually have like a hand on the scale when it comes to the manufacturing side, but it's something. So I can see some benefit to doing this, at least for the U.S. economy and cultural dominance.
It is such an interesting question because there's no like easy answer. If you don't sell chips to China, you encourage their own independence and effort to build them locally, right? And if you do sell chips to China, then you probably I don't know, like not sure that it's going to really change a whole lot. They see the U.S. as kind of unreliable and are constantly changing tariffs and other policies. They already want independence. Not sure that we're going to just like get them used to our tech stack and then they stop innovating locally. It seems so many unknowns, but if there's one thing that seems clear is like China is a major component of any kind of AI strategy, and the fact that like they're so competitive means that the US is trying to get involved. And even though this weird 15% deal seems very like corrupt and like the government sticking its hand into business and so on in weird ways, maybe it will incentivize the government to get more involved in AI if it sees like more returns on it. And that involvement could spur more AI support and development in the same way that the Chinese government got involved and pushed AI because it saw that it could return massive benefits as well. I don't know. I'm not super steeped in politics, so I don't really have an informed opinion about this. But it is a question Dan brought up, and worth looking at in light of this book. There's one other theme I wanted to bring up that I couldn't quite understand very well. And Florence, you brought this up at the start. You said it was interesting to see the depiction of the kind of Chinese company mentality, the gladiator mentality, the way that they integrate from the ground up in all aspects, that they're not beholden to some lofty mission. They're very focused on what turns profit and so on. What I don't understand is why there aren't more like China-based tech writing firms that will easily just take any kind of documentation project, turn it around in a fraction of the price, use AI models to clean up any kind of language frictions and issues, and just like put all tech writers out of business. The whole outsourcing idea initially surfaced probably a dozen years ago. People got real scared, but then it didn't really happen. People tried to offshore a lot of tech doc projects and didn't work so well, so pulled back. But why couldn't these? I feel like the way the author described the Chinese work ethic and mentality, and the gladiator sort of like do whatever it takes, work around the clock, push full throttle. Why isn't that just like putting tech writers out of business here in the U.S.?
I feel like it could happen eventually, but maybe there's just other applications of AI where they can make a lot more money, and there just isn't enough money to be made by replacing tech writers. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, in startups, like I'm the first tech writer at my company, and like, you know, I think a lot of companies get them later than they should because they don't prioritize it. And, you know, I just feel like maybe there just isn't enough money to be made yet to be bothered with it. But when they figure out the way to do it really cheaply, then sure, they'll just blow us all out of the water, and then we'll all be out of a job.
Or one of you can create that app first, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, I part of what I do, part of the consulting I do, I mean, a very significant lens is like change management for organizations on AI. And I try to prioritize like responsible AI change management, which means like human-centric and values aligned AI adoption. And I think for any prediction of like mass industry or job disruption or workforce disruption, change management is going to be a big bottleneck. Because when I look out, I mean, maybe for not as much for the next 2 generations of founders who are AI native, just in the same way that like tech native startup founders were just using the internet from the jump, right? But like, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and beyond kids who go into the workforce and then start to found their own companies, which is already happening, like AI is just there, right? And they may already be automating things, and it's not like replacing someone, it's just starting from there, right? I think that's going to be more and more common, but I think for the vast majority of organizations in this country that employ and contract people for their work, there's a really significant hill to overcome, which is just like, it's basically just like the bias of having done something a certain way forever. And I think we underestimate the extent to which that's going to slow AI adoption. Like, there's going to be a lot of disruption when the next generation of founders comes along, but they're not going to be in the C-suite of most companies for many years now, right? And we'll have maybe like the gerontocracy of like C-suites, organizational leadership over the next 10 or 15 years. And a lot of those organizations and people are just not going to make the shift as quickly as I think we assume, because it's really hard. Like the part of the framework that I offer is like, so that you don't have backsliding. I think a lot of organizations are saying, Duolingo and Klarna are 2 like tech startups that laid off a bunch of workers and said, oh, we're going to just automate their jobs, and then had to rehire almost all of them or other people to replace them because they weren't actually in the position to do that. Now, maybe 2 years from now, they'll be able to do that, but I think there's going to be more like lag and difficulty for a lot of reasons, including what you were talking about earlier, Tom, which is like assessing the actual output of the AI. Like, it's not going to be perfect. So I think there'll be more lag than people expect in a lot of ways, in part just because we're used to not working with it. So that's why I have some like skepticism around any claim that in the next few years, especially, entire industries are going to be completely wiped out. I do think there are obviously going to be really significant consequences in some industries. Like, we're already seeing mass layoffs by big tech companies that have the infrastructure to do that on a mass scale. And they're still going to be prestigious and still going to be able to attract the best talent no matter what, because they have so much money. But I don't think that's going to be the case for most businesses in this country. I think it's going to be a much slower roll.
I can see how your job and your role in change management is probably a pretty hot field right now. There's a lot of, that seems like a very difficult transition for companies to make. And I in many ways, I'm very glad that companies are slow to change, right? If they could just pivot overnight to some drastic new model that wiped out half their workforce and they didn't feel the pain, that would be scary. So, well, hey, this has been a great discussion. I appreciated your insights into this book. I'm glad we read it. Plug the next book in the list. Okay, it's going to be backwards, but Empire of AI by Karen Howe. This is a recent book. It's kind of similar to the AI supremacy book we recently read by Parmi Olson, but it's a little bit more anti-AI. I shouldn't say anti-AI. It's very rigorous. It's a little more critical. It's quite a thick book. I listened to half of it on the audiobook so far, and I was just like, we've got to read this one. This is a must read. It just goes in depth in so many different areas. And really, the title Empire of AI suggests like colonization and conquest of AI companies over so many different facets of life. It is a good book, even though I'm a AI optimist, but this is one we definitely should read. So I will send a little note about that and hope to see you at the next one. And also, these book clubs are recorded. And if for some reason you don't want me to share the recording on my site, let me know. But hopefully, you're okay with that. And really appreciate just your participation and just your forthcoming thoughts and reactions on this book. So thanks again. Any last thoughts that anybody wants to say before we close up? Okay.
Just nice to meet you all. Really appreciate the conversation. Looking forward to more.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
all
you.
right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye now.